Run, river, run, run through the hills. Run, river, run to the sea. Run, river, run to your place beneath the sun. Run, river, run over me.
Hi, this is Jan Lewis. Welcome to be my guest. And today we have Kelly Bollman with us. She is the volunteer coordinator for Brookhaven Hospice in Westborough. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here today.
Kelly, how did we connect? Was it an article?
I think you saw one of my volunteer match ads.
Oh, that's right. Was it one of your business cards? Or where was it?
I think maybe online.
Online?
Or, you could have seen it through AARP, different places that I post ads for volunteers.
What about the community advocate? That goes through Westborough. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it would have to be volunteer match or AARP probably.
So Kelly is now the volunteer for coordinators over there. What people don't know about Brookhaven, what exactly does it do?
So Brookhaven Hospice takes care of hospice patients. And if you're not familiar with hospice, hospice is about comfort care. So to be a patient on hospice, two doctors would have to state that you have a terminal illness, that it would be likely that you may not last longer than 6 months. Though many of our patients do, that's the guidelines for it. And then everybody is put on hospice with a primary diagnosis where they meet specific guidelines.
I've heard that hospice is not a death sentence. People do get past it sometimes.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of misconceptions about what hospice is. Sometimes people say, I'm giving up, or that's the end, or whatnot. And it's really when people choose, when they have a terminal illness, they no longer want to do treatments for it. They just want to have the rest of their life that they're comfortable, and they're not going to doctor's appointments, treatments, and whatnot. And hospice is very versatile, so maybe you're a cancer patient and you're done with treatments and you decide you want hospice, and you might be on hospice for a few months, but maybe another treatment comes out, or after hospice and all the comfort care, you're feeling better, you can go off of hospice and go back to treatment. So it's, very fluid.
What about during this COVID? Are patients' families coming in to see them? I mean, what an awful thing if they can't.
Yeah. Most places now are letting families in. At the beginning of COVID, it was really rough on the patients and the families because they couldn't go visit. And it was really hard. And we have a lot of dementia patients, so it was hard on them to understand why their family wasn't coming. And we did a lot of, Zoom calls and FaceTime, to try to keep the families connected. And as you can imagine, the facilities were very, very busy. And most of our team, a lot of times, was just our nurse and our aide who could go in. And our social workers and our chaplains and our volunteers and that were not allowed in. So our chaplains and social workers had to do FaceTime visits and that. And I'm glad to say that most facilities right now, the families can go in,
that's so good.
Which is wonderful. Because it's just so important that they have that.
Definitely.
Company.
I remember as a child, I think I was 6 years old, grew up in Wilbraham, and Springfield Hospital was one of the hospitals near us. And I remember going in, it wasn't anything to do with hospice, but I know the feeling. Back then, not that long ago, back then, parents could only come in for an hour at 7 to 8 at night. It was scary. It was an awful feeling, and it's a feeling of abandonment. Awful.
Yeah, it was hard. And when the families could first start going in, there was the 6-foot distancing rule, too. So it was hard when they go to visit, they couldn't hug, their family member or touch them or anything, but at least they did get to, go see them.
So you started Brookhaven in June?
Yes.
How did you get drawn to work at Brookhaven?
Well, I had been with another hospice company, and like many people with COVID, it changed many things. And there was 2 volunteer coordinators at my other hospice, and they could no longer justify having both of us because our volunteers couldn't go in.
Yeah.
So my job was eliminated, and then I had the opportunity came up as volunteers now are able to go in more and more. That Brookhaven Hospice reached out to me, and I was able to go back into hospice, which I was thrilled, and get the program back up and running because it'd been a good year and a half since volunteers for the most part could go in.
it takes a very special person, I'm sure, not only to do what you do, but to actually be another volunteer, somebody coming in from outside, never having done it. How do you help a volunteer adjust? They want to in their heart, but they're not sure they're going to make it.
Well, I have some amazing volunteers, and so whether somebody has had no experience with hospice, or they've had maybe a personal experience, or had another job where they worked with it, or whatever, it's all good because we train you. And so that's part of my job, is training you about everything and supporting my volunteers all through the way. So like when my volunteers make their first visit with their first patient, I always go with them.
Yeah.
And then, I just don't leave them there. When they're comfortable going on their own, then they will go by themselves.
Yeah.
And I would say most of my volunteers after the first visit are generally comfortable to go on their own because they get a lot of support.
Can you be any any age to volunteer? I mean, adult up to...
No. If you want to see patients directly, you do have to be 18 years or older. And you can work in our office in Westborough if you're 16.
Oh, that's good. Did you know when you graduated high school, did you know you would be doing this?
No.
What did you go? Did you go to college after high school?
I did. And I mean, I've been in healthcare in different ways on and off. Early in my career, I was in sales for actually business forms, but it was all hospitals. So I spent a lot of time out on the West Coast in a variety of hospitals, working with them to change their forms and all of that, jump ahead a ways. And I had a health and wellness center for 8 years.
Wow.
And that was more like holistic care, teaching people how to eat well and whatnot. And then I had a personal experience with both my mom and dad being on hospice. And after that, it just really touched me. And I thought, I really want to get into this field. And a friend of mine who had had this position told me about it, and I ended up pursuing it. And just, even though I came at it a different way, I had a lot of experience with patients and people and, healthcare and that.
So how many years have you been doing it?
Let's see, about 2.5.
That is really something.
Yeah.
But your dad and your mom were in hospice.
Yeah, they were both on hospice. And our first experience with hospice couldn't have been better.
Yeah.
The second one did not go so great.
What happened?
And it was just really, you have to like the team that you're working with.
Sure.
And so I say that to people too. If you don't like your hospice company, you can always switch as well, But because we'd had experience in hospice, we made it a good experience, even though it was more challenging. So it's good for people to know that, you have a choice who you use.
Well, there's ombudsman now, right? An ombudsman can come into a nursing center facility or maybe to hospice. They are the ones, an ombudsman, they're the kind that they go in and they listen to what the patient might have a little complaint or something, and they are the mediator. Then they take it to the staff, and they try to work it out. I don't believe they get paid. They're volunteers.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. I know my mother could have used that, one of the places she was.
Yeah, well, you find, our patients in hospice, they can use support because not all of them have family.
Yeah.
And, we have a lot of patients, 90s, 100s, and so a lot of their family is no longer with them and their friends and whatnot. So it's always nice to have those extra people who can advocate for them.
Where are you? Where is Brookhaven in Westborough? Where are you located?
Well, that's our administrative office, and we're off of Route 9 in Westborough. But our patients are wherever they call home. So it might be a skilled nursing facility, an assisted living, a memory care unit.
Okay.
They could be living in their own home or a family member's home. And we have patients all throughout the state.
Wow, okay. I expected Brookhaven. I thought maybe it was a facility in and of itself, and the person went in there. But no, this is great. You can take care of people all over the place.
Yeah, so we go to our patients wherever
I like that.
Their home is.
A friend of ours, my husband and I, he passed away, and he was in his home, I believe, and hospice came to him. I like that.
Yeah, and I would have to say probably the majority of patients, if they had a choice, would probably prefer to be home.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's difficult,
Yeah, definitely.
When people are working and whatnot. And I think that's one thing good about COVID. More people were working remotely, so it gave more people the opportunity to stay at home because their loved ones could be with them if they were working at home.
Yeah, and I know that, we have Dana-Farber. We're next to Milford, right up the street. do you have many patients that go there for their treatment, for their Dana-Farber, for their cancer treatment, chemo and all, that you would work with, that they might just come to their home, or how does that work? Or can they not be on any kind of treatment to go to to hospice?
Well, generally with hospice, it's comfort care.
Yeah.
And if you're in the hospital's goal is to treat you, and to fix what's wrong with you. For hospice, we're looking to keep the patient comfortable, and whether that's physically, spiritually, emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
So for the most part, they are not on treatment, but if there is something that they're doing that if it was taken away would make them less comfortable, it would depend on the situation.
Sure.
For example, if they've just come off of a cancer treatment, and maybe they just want to finish out a little bit of chemo or something,
sure.
To feel better. That is possible. Those are looked at on a
almost like a
case-by-case
respite
basis.
type of thing, too. Hospice isn't just about, I don't know, the last months of someone's life, but it's also about if you need a respite care, too, after coming off of chemo, and maybe you could have the hospice come to your house, kind of like be there for you until you feel better. Is that one thing they can do?
Well, you would have to have a diagnosis
Yeah.
that your condition was terminal, which, doesn't mean sometimes. I mean, we have hospice patients that we've had for 3 years,
Yep.
and, they'll kind of level off and they might decline, they might get a little bit better. We have to recertify patients every 90 days in the first 2 cycles, and then every 60 days. So we look at, do they still qualify?
Yeah.
And we have guidelines depending on what their primary diagnosis is.
Yeah.
And then if they can still meet that criteria, and sometimes we call them graduates, they have to go off of hospice because they're doing good, and that's not a bad thing.
No.
And when they do start declining again, then they can go back on hospice. And for an example, maybe we have a patient who's been living alone and it's been difficult for them to cook for themselves and they maybe get into a facility where now they have meals and they have people helping them with the care, and they thrive and they get better and they gain some weight, and they might have to go off of hospice.
Yeah.
And then if they do decline again, they'll go back on.
So we're talking with Kelly Bollman, and she is the volunteer coordinator for Brookhaven Hospice. And we were talking before the show. Tell us what the difference is between palliative care and hospice care.
Okay, so palliative care is comfort care, and hospice, as I mentioned, is comfort care. But if you're going to go on palliative care, it may be the step before you're ready for hospice.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, so maybe you're going through cancer treatments, but you want some comfort care. That's not what we do in hospice, but that is available to people. So they might be in the hospital, but be having palliative care.
Sure. Okay, so there is a difference. Some people think I didn't know about the difference before.
And because palliative is comfort care, it's kind of a little bit, interchangeable.
How many clients do you have, say, in a year that are in hospice?
Well, I would say our census varies between maybe like 115 and 150.
Yeah. With children too? Teens? Children?
We do not have teens. Most of our patients are between 70 and 100.
Listen to that, 100. That is fantastic.
Yeah, and we have a few over 100.
Yep.
And we do have some younger patients, but not children in our hospice.
I've wondered about that. Is there such a thing as palliative care or hospice care for children?
There is hospice care for children, and not always, but a lot of the time, those patients are going to be at home, which they can be on hospice. And I think a lot of times hospices that specialize in pediatrics.
Kelly, how can they reach you if they're interested in talking with you about it?
Yeah, well, they can give a call at my office, which is 855-820-4801. And you can ask for Kelly. And there's 2 Kellys in our office, so just say the volunteer coordinator and you'll get the right one.
They'll know.
Yeah. And if you don't want to call, you can always email me too, and it's Kelly, Kelly Bollman, Bollman at brookhavenhospice.com.
Now, the main office is in Westborough.
Correct.
So, do you cover the whole New England territory?
Brookhaven Hospice of Massachusetts
Yeah.
is what I cover. Brookhaven is also in southern New Hampshire, and they have their own office and their own volunteer coordinator, but we do have patients in southern New Hampshire. And then for Massachusetts, we do have patients all throughout the state. We're probably more heavily concentrated in the Worcester area, the Metro West.
Yeah.
We do have patients up north, and we also have them south, kind of Braintree area. Southeastern part of the state. We don't see patients at this time out in Cape Cod or out in the west.
Okay. My parents were in Foxborough. Would you have seen them? Would you have worked with them?
Yeah, at this time we don't have patients in the southwest part of
That's
the
the
state.
south. Okay, I thought it was southeast. No, wait a minute. Southeast, isn't it the southeast?
Yeah, that'd be a little bit more south, kind of more in the middle. And
Yeah.
we're more concentrated in Braintree, Plymouth, in that area.
Do you usually get a call from the family member or the doctor, the physician?
You know, it really varies. A doctor could refer it. A lot of times patients are already living in a facility, maybe assisted living or something,
Yeah.
and that facility will recognize that they might have a need and talk to the family about, learning more about hospice. And, or also, maybe somebody has had a friend that was on hospice and they're familiar, and they might reach out to us, and like, I think my family member might be ready. And then, of course, we have a whole team of people that can help answer all their questions about how am I going to pay for it, what do I need. And then 2 doctors would have to say that terminal illness, that the person most likely would be 6 months or less to live.
Do you go out yourself to see some of the families? Are they medical?
Me personally?
Yeah.
I do see families sometimes, but I see usually when I'm visiting patients and I run into them.
Yeah.
And so I guess a little bit about what makes up a hospice team is we have a medical director, and then we have RN case managers, we have LPNs, we have aides, and then we have social workers, we have chaplains, then we have myself, the volunteer coordinator, and we have our volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
And we have clinical education liaisons. So when somebody's first coming onto hospice, they'll probably meet with our clinical education liaison that can answer all their questions.
Yeah.
And then as things progress, our social worker, we're not only there for the patient, we're also there for the family.
Yeah.
So it's really for both. They can help people navigate everything. So our social workers can help them with, if they need help with, applying to UMass health insurance or something like that. Our administrative office, our intake coordinators and everything, when somebody's coming on, they're going through all of that, to check if, letting the families know what would be paid for, what would not, and help them navigate that whole process.
It sounds like a really complicated procedure, but that's why you're
Yeah.
there, to help people
Yeah.
go through it.
And the biggest thing people have to know is, they call the office, there's a ton of people to help them every step of the way with every question they could possibly come up with,
When a volunteer goes in, are they assigned to one patient at a time, and they go to the house for how many visits a week? Is that how it works?
Yeah, the volunteer schedule is flexible. I like volunteers to go at least twice a month, and what's really ideal is if volunteers can go once a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then it really depends on my volunteers' schedule of what they want to do. So, for example, if a volunteer wants to volunteer, say 2 hours a week,
Yep.
if I send them to a facility where a patient's at as opposed to a patient's home,
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably going to give them 2 or 3 patients. So that,
they're
if they go
regular.
and one's too
Yeah.
tired or something, they can
Yeah.
still have somebody to visit.
Yeah.
So I work with the volunteers, what their schedule is, how much time they want to put in, and then we do it accordingly.
What does a volunteer in hospice do?
Well, that's a bigger question than you think.
Is it fun for people? Is it upbeat fun, or what? What do you do?
I think it's fabulous, and there's really something for everybody.
Yeah.
So there's our volunteers who are patient companions that see the patients directly. And so they're going to visit with the patient and meeting them where they're at. It could be a patient that's fairly non-responsive, that they might just be there as a presence, holding their hand, maybe playing music. It could be another patient that they're taking them for a walk, they're taking them down to the activities room, they might be reading with them,
Yeah.
playing music with them, just
Drawing
having
things apart.
conversation, doing art with them. So we really just meet our patients where they're at. And then if you're somebody like that wants to help in hospice, but you're not comfortable with that direct patient contact, we have office volunteers in our Westborough office, and they would do things like help with filing and scanning and copying and some of the administrative tasks.
Yeah.
And if you have a specialty, like say you're a massage therapist or you're a Reiki practitioner, or you have a pet therapy animal,
yeah.
or you're a veteran, those are some specialties.
Yeah.
And so if somebody's licensed or certified in, for example, massage or Reiki or aromatherapy or something like that,
Sure.
I can have those kind of volunteers that can utilize those skills. And then we have a special program for veterans, and we try to match veterans with veteran patients, because we do have a lot of veterans.
Yeah.
And we belong to a phenomenal program called We Honor Veterans. And the Department of Veteran Affairs and the National Organization of Hospice and Palliative Care got together, like, how can we better serve our veterans? And our role as hospice is a lot of education, educating our staff, our volunteers, the facilities, helping families navigate the veterans' benefits, because a lot of veterans aren't aware of their benefits.
Yeah.
And if they are aware, we can help them get to the right people to be able to utilize them. And so in that We Honor Veterans program, another thing is if we can match a veteran with a veteran patient, that can be really meaningful, because sometimes they have that kind of unspoken bond of things they understand, and it can really maybe help the patient have somebody to talk to that can maybe really relate to some things that they might not share.
Right, you have the Wounded
With
Warrior
somebody
Project.
else.
Do they ever call you from the Wounded Warrior Project, say we have a gentleman or a woman who would like to have another vet come stay with them or visit with them in hospice?
I specifically have not gotten a call from that. And we actually have a person named Mary Beth who is our We Honor Veteran coordinator. And so when we get veteran patients, she works with them specifically, you know, and the families. And so we have a lot of resources for the veterans and that. So it's a really special program. And of course, it being Veterans Day last week, it was my favorite. We do in the facilities, we do a lot of veteran recognitions for all of the veterans in the facility.
That's great.
And that's always really touching, because we want them to know that we remember what they did. We value their service, and we don't want them to ever be forgotten.
Exactly, and what's up there in UMass, they've got that great big new building for the vets. The VA right beside I think it's attached to the huge parking garage there, right on the UMass campus. I mean, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's a really special program. I really do love it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be able to have that extra education for everybody so that we can really understand the special needs of the veterans, you know, and depending on what war they were in and, you know, how they served and whatnot, whether it's, you know, again, physical, spiritual, emotional support, how we can, you know, better serve them.
Kelly Bollman is the volunteer coordinator at Brookhaven Hospice, and it's primarily located, its main branch the office is in Westborough, but they help with hospice all over Massachusetts. Kelly, how can they get a hold of you if they'd like to speak to you?
They can call me at 855-820-4801.
Just ask for Kelly, right?
Yeah.
And there are two Kellys, so say the coordinator.
Yes, the two Kellys.
She's the one.
They'll get them to the right one.
When somebody is a volunteer is like educated in how it happens and what to do you ever try to mix the talent of the volunteer with the hospice patient? Maybe there's something they have in common, like the vets. Do they have something like that?
Yeah. I mean, certainly, like when I put a volunteer with a patient, you know, sometimes we have a lot of information on the patient, sometimes we don't, but we certainly try to, you know, if I have a volunteer, then they both have like the same interest in something, you know, when you can do that. But we always go in kind of with a bit of a plan of what they like so that, you know, we can do things that they would enjoy.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's so many things. What art, pets, reading. I mean, what is the majority of? Do most like to be patients like to have somebody read with them, or just sit with them, or just chat? What's the biggest one?
I mean, everybody everybody's different, and I think a lot of it is just somebody coming in. And our volunteers is great because we're not coming in and having to do anything to you, but be with you and be there for you, and just really just kind of be a friend to you and be able to listen and,
You said key word, listen.
And talk with you and, maybe help you reminisce about happy memories or whatever it is you want to talk about, or if you just need somebody, a listening ear. So we really try to look at each patient as an individual and then how we can best serve them.
Are you allowed, if you are a therapy pet owner, are you allowed to bring in the therapy pet or not to show the patient and they could the comfort of the animal?
Yeah, if the patient wants to see it and your pet therapy is certified, we can do that.
Everybody has to have been vaccinated. That's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, I do have a list of you have tos, and COVID vaccine is one of them.
And do you still have to wear masks when you go in?
All of our facilities require masks.
Even the patients, or just the staff?
Our patients don't generally wear them, but all of our staff does. And then each facility, because we go in as a guest, whatever what they are requiring. So you could go into a facility right now that might require a face shield and goggles or whatever. And that's constantly changing and varying. But right now, everybody still has a mask on.
So if perhaps you mentioned a massage therapist, an art therapist, or whatever, they could actually tell you all this, and perhaps they could help someone.
Yeah, and I don't know if I have time, but I didn't hit the creative people because I have volunteers that make prayer shawls and blankets and quilts and memory bearers and, a lot of other things. So if you're a creative person, there's a lot of opportunities as well.
I have to talk with her about that because I do some creative things myself. I give it to them, maybe they'd like it. So we've been talking to Kelly Bollman, and she is a volunteer coordinator over at Brookhaven Hospice, and she'd probably love to talk with you anytime if you have any questions. And we're going to close one more time. How can they get a hold of you?
855-820-4801. And ask for Kelly.
The Kelly, the coordinator. There are two Kellys, right?
That's right.
She's the coordinator.
They'll get her to the right one. Yeah, they'll get you to the right one. And even if you just want to, reach out and you have questions you're not sure, I'm always happy to talk to anyone.
I'm glad they got people there to walk people through the insurance part. You try to go through that alone with
I know the basics, but I don't know the details. But we have fabulous people in the office that do.
I hear you. I'm not a numbers person.
I hear everything that goes on, but I...
Thank you for being with us, Kelly.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
We'll see you next time I be my guest.
Riding on a shooting star, heading out toward a dream. Tomorrow's even closer than it seems.